So imagine lying inside a massive, like, humming magnetic tube.
Right, getting an MRI.
Yeah, exactly. And a researcher in the other room just asks you to do something incredibly simple. They say, just press a button with your left hand or your right hand whenever you feel the urge to do so.
Sounds like a pretty standard setup.
Right. So you lie there, you think about it for a second, you feel this very distinct, conscious desire to press the left button, and you press it. And you probably walk out of that lab thinking you just made a completely free, independent choice.
I mean, it certainly feels that way. We all experience life through this lens of being the absolute authors of our own actions.
But the scientist looking at the screen in the other room knows something that you don't. By watching the blood flow in your brain, they actually knew you were going to press that left button up to 10 seconds before you even realized you wanted to do it.
Wow. Yeah, which is just...
Your brain made the choice, and a decade of seconds later, your conscious mind just took the credit.
Which is basically the absolute definition of an existential crisis waiting to happen.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are tackling one of the most provocative, kind of mind-bending debates in philosophy and neuroscience today.
Yeah, the big question, does free will actually exist, or is the whole concept just a brilliantly engineered biological illusion?
Exactly. And we've got a dense stack of source material today exploring brain imaging, the myth of the blank slate, and the true hidden origins of human behavior. The mission for us today is to completely deconstruct how much control you really have over your own life.
And perhaps more importantly, we want to explore how stripping away that illusion fundamentally shifts our understanding of success, of failure, and honestly, of society itself.
Right, because when you pull back the curtain on the actual mechanical reasons behind why we do what we do, it doesn't just change a few philosophical definitions, it changes everything about how we judge ourselves and each other.
It absolutely does.
So I want to talk directly to you, the listener, for a second. Think about why you clicked play on this exact deep dive today.
Was it a totally free, independent choice?
Right. Or were there invisible dominoes already falling for years, maybe decades, locked inside your neurobiology just to make this specific moment happen? Okay, let's unpack this.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to look at the exact mechanics of a choice. We need to zoom all the way in on the biological hardware of the brain before we can zoom out to the broader implications for our lives.
Because the source material points straight to these functional MRI or fMRI studies, which are frankly kind of terrifying if you like feeling in control.
They really are.
Like, how does a machine know what I'm going to do before I do? Let's break down how this actually works.
Well, it comes down to understanding what an fMRI scanner is actually measuring, right? It isn't reading your thoughts like a psychic.
It's tracking blood flow.
Exactly. Blood flow and oxygenation. When a specific cluster of neurons in your brain fires up to execute a task, those cells need oxygen, so blood rushes to that area.
Okay, so the scanner just detects that localized rush of oxygen-rich blood.
Precisely.
So it's basically tracking the brain's internal supply chain in real time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this builds on the famous experiments by a scientist named Benjamin Libet in the 1980s, which have basically been modernized with today's fMRI technology.
Right, where they ask subjects to watch a clock.
Yeah, they watch a clock and note the exact millisecond they feel the conscious urge to move their hand. But when scientists monitor the supplementary motor area...
Which is the part of the brain responsible for planning movement, right?
Exactly. When they monitor that area, they see the blood flow surge.
And that surge happens before the person actually notes the urge on the clock.
Up to 7 to 10 seconds before.
That is wild.
It is. The neural machinery is already grinding into gear, preparing to push the left button long before the conscious mind says, hey, I think I'll choose left.
So that internal monologue we all have, that like feeling of weighing our options and making a choice?
It appears to be essentially a post hoc rationalization. It's a psychological narrative that comes after the subconscious has already crunched the data and initiated the action. Yeah, your conscious mind is essentially sitting in the passenger seat, holding a plastic toy steering wheel, and just convincing itself that it's driving the car.
Okay, I have to push back on this on behalf of everyone listening, because it defies every ounce of lived experience.
It definitely feels wrong.
Like, wait, I actively chose to listen to this material today. I opened the app, I scrolled through my options, I saw this topic, and I commanded my thumb to press play. Are you telling me I didn't actually make that choice?
What's fascinating here is that while you absolutely feel like the sole author of that narrative, much of the script was handed to you before you even arrived on the scene.
Okay, explain that.
Let's trace your example backward. The source material refers to this as the regression of choice. You chose to hit play, but why?
Because I was genuinely curious about the topic. The title caught my eye.
Sure. But did you consciously choose to be a curious person? Did you sit down one day when you were 3 years old and decide, I will be the kind of person who enjoys dense, philosophical deep dives?
Well, no. I guess my personality has just always been geared toward figuring out how things work.
Right. And where did that personality come from? Did you choose your specific genetic code?
No.
Did you choose the parents who raised you? Did you choose the early childhood environment that rewarded your curiosity instead of, say, punishing it?
I see where you're going with this.
Did you choose the specific neurochemistry that releases a hit of dopamine when you learn a new fact?
Yeah, I didn't order the ingredients. I'm just eating the meal.
Exactly. If you trace any decision backward, you inevitably hit a wall of unchosen factors.
Yeah.
Every single time.
You are making choices, yes. But you're making them using a brain, a temperament, and a history that were handed to you completely outside of your control.
Right.
Man, if our brains are secretly pulling the levers before we even realize it, then we have to fundamentally rethink every time we've patted ourselves on the back for a good decision.
We really do.
This brings us to a really uncomfortable territory. If our moment-to-moment choices are essentially preloaded, what does that mean for our major life achievements? The whole concept of the self-made human completely fractures under this lens.
It does. And the source material spends a lot of time deconstructing this myth of the self-made individual.
Because we routinely take immense pride in and claim personal credit for traits that we never actually selected.
Yeah, we treat the blank slate theory, the idea that we all start from zero and just build ourselves through sheer will, as an absolute given.
Which means we're taking credit for things like raw intelligence, natural confidence, our baseline talents, our preferences.
We view these things as accomplishments, but in reality, they are largely the result of the lottery of birth.
The sources gave this really striking example to illustrate the mechanics of this lottery. Like, imagine two children born on the exact same day in the same hospital.
Oh.
Child A goes home to a deeply loving, supportive environment with financial stability and plenty of resources.
And child B,
Child B goes home to an environment dominated by domestic violence, scarcity, and chronic fear.
right, and neither of those children chose their zip code or their parents.
Exactly. But it's not just about the external environment. It's about what that environment actually does to the biological hardware, right? This is where it gets beyond just philosophy and into hard science.
Absolutely. We have to look at neuroplasticity.
Right.
A child growing up in a violent, high-stress environment is swimming in cortisol.
Which is a stress hormone.
Yeah, it's a stress hormone. And over time, that chronic stress literally rewires the physical structure of the brain. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it hypertrophies.
Meaning it grows larger.
It grows larger and becomes hyperreactive. Meanwhile, the development of the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and impulse control, is stunted.
So when those two children reach adulthood, child B isn't just making quote-unquote bad choices. Child B is operating a completely different biological machine.
Exactly. An overactive threat detection system makes aggressive or defensive behavior a default survival mechanism.
And yet society will judge those two adults as if they started from the exact same starting line.
We will praise the success of child A, attributing it to their good character, and we will condemn the struggles of child B, completely ignoring the unchosen biological scaffolding that dictated their respective paths.
There was another example in the material that I loved about a brilliant musician. Let's picture an incredible concert pianist. They finish a performance, the crowd goes wild, and everyone praises their incredible dedication, their raw talent, their sacrifices.
But if we run that regression of choice again, we have to ask the uncomfortable questions.
Right. Did that musician choose to be born with a brain that naturally processes complex auditory patterns with such clarity?
No. Did they choose to have hands with the ideal dexterity for a keyboard?
No. And they didn't choose the specific music teacher who happened to inspire them at age 10 instead of, like, making them hate the instrument.
Right. They didn't choose the exact moment they first heard a piece of classical music that sparked their dopamine receptors and made them fall in love with it.
The massive, often completely unacknowledged role of luck is just the silent partner in literally every success story.
It really is.
Okay, let me pause you there because I can hear people yelling at their devices right now.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Because sure, natural talent is luck. Having a supportive teacher is luck. But what about grit?
Ah, the grit argument.
Right. Sitting at a piano for 10 hours a day, pushing through the frustration, giving up your weekends to practice, doesn't the sheer ability to work hard prove free will? You can't fake that kind of discipline.
It is the most common counter-argument to determinism, and it feels intuitively correct. We inherently want to believe that effort is the ultimate equalizer.
Yeah.
But the science forces us to question where the ability or the drive to work hard actually comes from.
Wait, you're saying even my work ethic isn't my own choice?
Let's look at the mechanism. Why does one person have the capacity to delay gratification and grind through 10 hours of practice, while another person gets overwhelmed, frustrated, and quits after 10 minutes?
I mean, I'd usually just call that willpower.
Right, but that capacity for discipline isn't magic. It is tied directly to executive function.
Which is that prefrontal cortex we mentioned earlier.
Yes, the prefrontal cortex is basically your brain's management system located right behind your forehead. It handles planning, working memory, impulse control.
Okay.
If you have a highly developed prefrontal cortex, you can suppress the urge to go watch TV so you can keep practicing piano.
Let's see if I've got a good analogy for this. So it's like a computer processor. Some people are just born with a faster microchip so they can run more complex discipline programs.
Well, the computer chip implies it's entirely static, which isn't quite right. A better way to visualize it is pouring a foundation for a house.
Okay, I like that.
The concrete is your early childhood environment, your nutrition, your stress levels, and your genetics. If your foundation was poured on unstable sand, say, through childhood trauma or neglect, it sets crooked.
Oh, wow.
You cannot build a 10-story skyscraper of massive discipline and grit on a crooked, sandy foundation without immense structural intervention.
So the person with the deep, solid concrete foundation isn't morally superior. They just had the right materials poured for them early on.
Exactly.
Wow, okay. Hearing that everything, literally everything, down to the biological hardware that allows me to try hard, comes down to genetics and luck. It can feel incredibly fatalistic.
Yeah, it can.
Like, why get out of bed? Does this mean we are just helpless meat robots? Does the concept of freedom just disappear entirely?
That is the natural reaction, but it relies on a false binary.
How so?
People often mistakenly assume there are only two options. Either we have absolute godlike freedom over every aspect of our lives, or we are locked into a rigid, unyielding determinism where we are just puppets on a string.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources use this fantastic sailor analogy to bridge that gap and explain the nuance.
It's a brilliant visual.
Imagine a sailor out on the open ocean. That sailor cannot control the wind. They can't control the size of the waves or the storm rolling in or the currents beneath the hull.
Right. All of those external forces are the absolute determined factors. They are your genetics, your childhood environment, the neuroplasticity of your early years, and the sheer luck of circumstance.
But the sailor can adjust the sails.
Precisely. You are not responsible for the storm, but you are the one holding the ropes.
It totally reframes how we look at our daily struggles. It actually lowers the anxiety a bit.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off.
Because you aren't responsible for the fact that a massive wave of anxiety or a stressful situation hit your ship today. That's just the weather. But your conscious mind still has to navigate it.
The material also uses the analogy of a card game, which grounds it nicely.
Right.
You do not choose the cards you are dealt in life. You didn't pick your hand. But you do choose how you play them.
Freedom exists, but it exists strictly within unchosen limits.
Right.
You can bluff with a bad hand, you can fill the mediocre one, but you can't magically turn a 2 of clubs into an ace of spades.
You are operating within parameters that were set for you, but within those parameters there is a space for response. Your brain is a biological organism responding to stimuli, but the sheer complexity of that response, like your ability to take in new information, like listening to a deep dive and using it to update your neural pathways, is where our limited practical version of freedom lives.
So if we were just sailors dealing with unchosen weather, operating within strict biological limits, how do we handle the shipwrecks?
That is the big question.
Like, how should we judge the people whose ships crash onto the rocks?
This is perhaps the most profound implication of this entire scientific debate.
Because if we accept this, that people's actions are largely dictated by an overactive amygdala or a sandy foundation or a genetic predisposition to addiction, it radically shifts how we view criminals, people who fail, and even the ultra-successful folks we idolize.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, accepting our lack of absolute free will actually demands that society becomes vastly more compassionate and vastly more structural in how it solves problems.
How so? Walk me through that.
The sources outline a brilliant comparison using a bridge collapse. If a major suspension bridge suddenly collapses, what happens the next day?
Well, structural engineers swarm the site. They investigate the tensile strength of the steel, they check the weight loads, they examine the wind shear, they look for rust in the rebar.
Exactly. They look for the underlying mechanisms of the failure. What they explicitly do not do is stand at the edge of the water, shake their fists, and shout at the broken concrete, calling it morally evil for collapsing.
Right. So wait, are you saying that if a person commits a terrible crime because their amygdala is overactive and their foundation was poured on sand, we just let them off the hook? We just say, hey, not your fault, you're free to go.
Not at all. And the source material is very careful about this distinction.
Okay, good.
If a bridge is structurally unsound and dangerous, you do not keep it open for traffic.
You quarantine it.
You quarantine it. You close it to protect the public. We still need systems to keep dangerous people off the streets, but the intent behind the quarantine shifts dramatically.
You don't hate the bridge.
Right. You don't view the concrete as possessing a wicked soul. You recognize a structural failure, you secure the area, and you work on fixing the underlying conditions so the next bridge doesn't fall.
We treat social problems with condemnation because it's easier. We look at crime or addiction or poverty and we shout at the broken bridge. We say, that person made bad choices, therefore they are a bad person.
Because understanding takes resources. Investigating the root causes of human behavior, early childhood trauma, lack of health care, generational poverty, neurochemistry, is incredibly difficult, time-consuming, and expensive.
But blame, on the other hand, is free.
Blame is totally free. It's a psychological shortcut that lets society off the hook.
Wow.
If someone is poor purely because of a moral failing, then society doesn't have to invest billions in early childhood education. If someone is addicted because they are weak, we don't have to overhaul our healthcare system.
The sources point out something fascinating about how this culture of blame gets historically reinforced too. They note that various belief systems and societal structures have historically framed suffering as a consequence of bad moral choices, while framing success as a sign of moral superiority.
Which serves to justify whatever social hierarchy currently exists.
Right. If the wealthy, successful person is morally superior because of their good choices, and the suffering person is morally inferior because of their bad choices, then the massive inequality in the system is totally justified.
But if we strip all that away and look at the actual causes, the brain scans, the environment, the lottery of birth, it completely dismantles that hierarchy.
Which is why the ultimate lesson of the free will debate isn't nihilism, where nothing matters. It's humility, and it's extreme compassion.
Exactly. When you begin to look for the invisible causes beneath the surface of every success and every failure, you judge less harshly and you understand more deeply.
It's like if someone cuts you off in traffic, maybe they're just a jerk. Or maybe their prefrontal cortex is exhausted from working 3 jobs, or they're rushing to a hospital, or their baseline biology defaults to aggression under stress. You don't know the invisible dominoes that led to that swerve.
You don't. And recognizing your own ignorance of their structural reality is the first step toward a more empathetic society. We still need to hold people accountable for the damage they cause, but we can do it without the self-righteous hatred.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the terrifying realization inside an fMRI scanner, proving that your subconscious neural machinery is making decisions up to 10 seconds before you even realize it.
We dismantled the myth of the completely self-made human by looking at how our biological hardware, our executive function, and our environments are handed to us through the lottery of birth.
But we also found a little bit of daylight in the storm. We aren't helpless robots. Absolute godlike freedom might be a myth, but we still have a role to play in the circumstances we are handed. We still hold the ropes, and we still have to adjust the sails.
And ideally, absorbing all of this science makes us profoundly humble about our own successes and vastly more compassionate about other people's failures. Nobody knows the final, definitive answer to the free will question for certain, but this deep dive proves that we are inextricably woven into our environment, our biology, and our history.
I want you, the listener, to really reflect on the choices you're going to make for the rest of the day. When you pick what to eat for dinner, or how you react to an annoying email, or what time you go to bed, how many of those choices are truly independently free?
And how many were shaped by neurochemical forces you never chose, stretching back years or even generations?
It's an incredibly powerful lens to view your own life through.
It is. But before we sign off, there is one final, somewhat mind-bending concept from our source material to leave you chewing on.
Oh, right. This is the part that kept me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m.
So we have established that our behaviors, our preferences, and our momentary choices are fundamentally shaped by outside forces, genetics, and environment. Our thoughts are basically just weather patterns passing through the brain.
Okay,
If that is true, then what exactly is the self?
the I. The thing inside my head that feels like me.
The entity that you firmly believe yourself to be, listening to this deep dive right now. If every single ingredient that makes up you was handed to you by external causes, and your conscious thoughts are just delayed reports of subconscious brain activity, is the concept of a unified, independent self just another brilliant survival illusion constructed by your biology?
That is huge. Because if the wind decides the direction, but you still hold the sail, who is really steering the ship?